30,000 feet in the air. My sister watched my husband toast a woman with amber eyes. Meanwhile, in our Seattle penthouse, my husband was humming jazz and chopping onions. One of these men is a master liar. The other is standing right behind me holding a chef's knife. I have exactly 3 hours to determine who is the real husband, who is the perfect duplicate, and why $50 million just vanished from our Swiss account. The game begins. My name is Isabel Merriweather, and until 5 minutes ago, I believed my life was a masterpiece of architectural precision. I live in a world of binary codes, firewalls, and absolute truths. As a senior cybersecurity analyst for a private defense firm, I am paid an exorbitant salary to detect anomalies, to spot the single pixel that does not belong in a high-definition image, to hear the one false note in a symphony of data. My existence is built on the foundation that reality is verifiable. If I can touch it, if I can trace its digital footprint, it is real. But as I stood in the center of my living room on a rainy Friday evening in Seattle, that foundation was not just cracking, it was dissolving into mist. The penthouse was warm, a stark contrast to the relentless gray drizzle battering the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Puget Sound. Inside, the air smelled of caramelized onions, thyme, and the rich, woody scent of expensive sandalwood. The cologne my husband, Lucas, had worn since our third date. Lucas was standing at the kitchen island, his back to me, the sleeves of his crisp white dress shirt rolled up to his elbows. He was humming a low, complex jazz melody, something by Miles Davis, his head bobbing slightly to the rhythm as his knife moved with rhythmic precision against the cutting board. Lucas was the chief strategy officer for Ether Dynamics, a company that dealt in the kind of theoretical tech that usually made government regulators nervous. His weeks were filled with boardroom battles and international conference calls, but Friday nights were sacrosanct. Friday nights were for us. No phones, no emails, just cooking and wine and the view of the city lights shimmering through the rain. I watched him reach for the glass of red wine sitting on the marble counter. He took a sip, then set it down, tapping his index finger against the granite 3 times. Tap, 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 a pause, then one final tap. It was a subconscious tick, a rhythm he drummed out whenever he was content, a habit he had possessed for the 7 years we had been married. It was as much a part of him as his laugh, or the way his eyes crinkled when he told a bad joke. Seeing it now, watching the familiar flex of his forearm muscles as he returned to chopping the onions for his signature French onion soup. I felt a surge of warmth. This was safety. This was home. Then my phone buzzed against the hardwood of the coffee table. The sound was jarring in the domestic tranquility. I frowned, walking over to retrieve it. We had a strict rule about screens on date night, but the caller ID flashed a name that I could not ignore. Elena. My sister, Elena, was a senior captain for Atlas Air, flying long-haul international routes. If she was calling me now, it meant she was either on the ground during a layover or there was an emergency. I slid the unlock bar and pressed the phone to my ear. "Hey, Elle," I said, keeping my voice low so as not to disturb Lucas's jazz session. "I thought you were flying the red-eye to Paris tonight." "I am," Elena's voice came through, but it did not sound like her usual confident, command voice drawl. It was tight, breathless, and dropped to a frantic whisper. The background hum was distinct, the heavy, pressurized drone of a cockpit mid-flight, overlaid with the static of radio chatter. "Isabel, listen to me very carefully. Is Lucas home right now?" I blinked, confused by the urgency in her tone. I looked up at the kitchen. Lucas was now adding beef stock to the pot, the steam rising around him like a halo. "Yes, of course he is. We are making dinner. He is standing 20 feet away from me. Why?" There was a pause on the line, long enough that I thought the connection had dropped. Then, Elena spoke, and her words were ice water in my veins. "That is not possible. Isabel, that cannot be true because I am staring at him right now. I came out of the cockpit to stretch my legs and check on the purser. He is sitting in seat 1A, first class. He is on my flight to Paris. I let out a short, incredulous laugh. Elena, you are exhausted. The cabin pressure is getting to you. Lucas is right here. I can smell his cologne. I can hear him humming. I am not crazy, and I am not tired, Elena snapped, her whisper fierce. I know what my own brother-in-law looks like. He is wearing that navy blue blazer you bought him for his birthday. And he is not alone. He is holding hands with a woman, a redhead. She looks young, maybe mid-20s. She is wearing a vintage Balenciaga coat that probably costs more than my car. My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. Stop it. This isn't funny. Maybe it is just a doppelganger. Someone who looks like him. It happens. I thought that too, Elena said. So I walked past them again. I pretended to adjust the overhead bin. Isabel. I got close enough to see the pores on his face. I saw the scar. The word hung in the air between us. The scar. Last July. During a trip to Lake Washington, a snapped cable on our sailboat had whipped back and sliced Lucas just under the chin. It was a jagged, distinct mark, shaped almost like a lightning bolt, barely visible unless he tilted his head up, but unmistakable to anyone who knew him. You saw the scar, I asked, my voice barely audible. The white, jagged line under the left side of his jaw, Elena confirmed, her voice trembling. It is him, Isabel. I am sending you a picture. I had to be discreet, so I took it through the gap in the privacy curtain. My phone vibrated against my ear, a message delivered. I pulled the phone away, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I tapped the message. The image loaded. The photo was grainy, taken in the low, ambient lighting of a first-class cabin at night. It was shot from a low angle, peering through the heavy velvet of the partition, but the subject was in focus. It was Lucas. There was no doubt, no hesitation in my mind. It was the same sharp jawline, the same sweep of dark hair graying slightly at the temples. He was turned toward the woman beside him, a striking redhead whose profile was just visible. Lucas was smiling at her, a smile of intimate, unguarded affection that I recognized because it was the smile he usually reserved for me. And there, illuminated by the soft reading light from the cabin wall, was the scar, that jagged, lightning bolt white line under his chin. I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process the data. It was a glitch, a deep fake, a manipulation. Isabel, Elena's voice was tinny from the speaker. Did you get it? I didn't answer. Slowly, terrified of what I might find, I lifted my head and looked toward the kitchen. The man who claimed to be my husband turned around at that exact moment. Isabel, he called out, his voice warm, rich, and painfully familiar. Who is on the phone? Everything okay? He wiped his hands on a kitchen towel and picked up 2 glasses of wine, walking toward me with that easy, confident stride I had watched 1,000 times. He wore the casual gray cashmere sweater I loved, the sleeves pushed up. He stopped 3 feet in front of me. He tilted his head slightly, a look of concern washing over his features. Honey, you look like you have seen a ghost. As he tilted his head, the overhead recessed lighting of the living room cast a shadow across his neck. There, etched into the skin under his left jaw, was a jagged, white scar shaped like a lightning bolt. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I looked down at the phone in my hand at the Lucas in seat 1A with the scar. Then I looked up at the Lucas in my living room with the scar. Panic, cold and primal, tried to seize my throat. My stomach lurched. Threatening to rebel against the lunch I had eaten 6 hours ago, this was impossible. Physics did not allow for this. Biology did not allow for this. Unless I was having a psychotic break, one of these realities was a lie. But which one? The man in front of me extended the wine glass. Here, he said softly. 1996 Barolo. I opened it an hour ago to let it breathe. It is perfect. I looked at the wine. The dark, blood-red liquid swirled in the crystal. If the man on the plane was Lucas, then who was this who had been sleeping in my bed, wearing my husband's clothes, kissing me goodbye in the mornings? And if this was Lucas, then who was on the plane fooling my sister? A woman trained to notice the smallest details. Isabel, he pressed, his smile faltering just a fraction. I forced my training to take over. Panic was a luxury I could not afford. In my line of work, when a system is compromised, you do not scream. You isolate the variable. You contain the breach. You analyze the threat. Sorry, I managed to say. My voice sounded surprisingly steady, though it felt detached from my body, as if I were speaking through a long tunnel. Just work drama, a server crash at the data center. Elena was calling to vent about a delay. It was a clumsy lie, but he seemed to buy it. The tension in his shoulders relaxed. Well, put the phone away. Tonight is about us. No servers, no data. I reached out and took the glass. His fingers brushed mine. His skin was warm, dry, human. He didn't feel like a monster. He felt like the man I had married. Cheers, he whispered, clinking his glass against mine. Cheers, I echoed. I raised the glass to my lips but did not drink. I tilted the glass just enough to wet my lip, faking the swallow. I needed a clear head. I needed every neuron firing at maximum capacity. I watched him take a long sip, his eyes closing briefly in appreciation of the vintage. When he opened them, they locked onto mine. They were hazel, flecked with gold, the exact shade they had always been. But as I stared into them, searching for a glitch, for a contact lens, for a void where a soul should be, I saw something else, or maybe I imagined it. Was there a slight tightness at the corner of his eyes? Was his blink rate just a fraction of a second too slow? He turned back toward the kitchen. Soup needs 5 more minutes. Why don't you pick some music? Maybe something slower. He walked away, and as he did, I watched his gait. He led with his left foot. Lucas always led with his left foot. He reached for the pepper grinder with his right hand. Lucas was right-handed. Every micro movement was a perfect replication of the man I loved. That was what terrified me the most. If this was an imposter, he wasn't just a look-alike. He was a masterpiece. He was a work of art created with malicious, forensic attention to detail. And works of art like that take time. They take study. They take resources. Who had been watching us long enough to build this? And why was he here? If the real Lucas was on a plane to Paris with $50 million drained from our accounts, a fact I remembered seeing in a notification just before Elena called, a notification I had dismissed as a banking error, then the man in my kitchen wasn't here to play house. He was here to keep me occupied. He was here to keep me quiet. I looked at the knife block on the counter. The chef's knife was missing because he was using it. I needed to get away from him. I needed a secure line. I needed to see what my house, my smart, interconnected, fully monitored fortress of a penthouse could tell me that my eyes could not. I need to wash up, I said, setting the full wine glass down on the coaster. I feel a bit grimy from the day. Give me 10 minutes. Lucas, or the entity wearing his face, looked over his shoulder. He smiled again. Take your time, babe. I will pour the soup. Okay, I said. I turned and walked toward the master bedroom, forcing myself not to run. My legs felt like lead. I could feel his eyes on my back, watching me. Was he analyzing my gait too? Was he wondering why I hadn't taken a drink? I entered the bedroom and walked straight into the ensuite bathroom. I closed the heavy oak door. I turned the lock. Click. Then I engaged the secondary deadbolt I had installed 2 years ago. A paranoid quirk that Lucas had teased me about. Thud. I let out a breath that sounded like a sob. I moved to the sink and turned on the faucet, blasting the water to create white noise. Then, I sank to the floor, pulling my phone from my pocket. My hands were trembling so hard I could barely type the passcode. I opened the app that controlled the localized server I had built into the walls of the penthouse. It was a closed loop, separate from the cloud, separate from ether dynamics, separate from everything. It was my own personal black box. Ghost protocol initiated, I whispered to the voice command interface. The screen flashed red, then settled into a grim, dark gray interface. Streams of data began to scroll. I needed to see everything. I needed to see the heat signatures. I needed to see the network traffic. I needed to see if the man in my kitchen was transmitting a signal. I had 3 hours before that plane landed in Paris. 3 hours to dissect a lie that was standing in my kitchen making onion soup. I looked at the mirror. My own face was pale, my green eyes wide with terror. "Pull it together, Isabel," I hissed at my reflection. I swiped to the camera feed of the kitchen. On the small screen of my phone, I watched the man in the cashmere sweater. He had stopped cooking. He was standing perfectly still, holding the chef's knife, staring directly at the bathroom door. He wasn't humming anymore. I stared at the screen of my phone, watching the man in my kitchen through the hidden camera feed. He had resumed chopping parsley, the knife moving in a blur of motion that was both domestic and terrifyingly efficient. The stillness I had witnessed moments ago, that predatory focus directed at the bathroom door, was gone, replaced by the casual demeanor of a husband preparing dinner. It was a performance. I knew that now. But the terrifying question was for whose benefit there was no audience here but me. I splashed cold water on my face, drying it with a plush towel. My reflection stared back, eyes wide, skin pale, but jaw set. I had spent 15 years dissecting code, identifying Trojan horses buried deep within legitimate software. I knew how to run a diagnostic. It was time to run one on the man in my kitchen. I unlocked the bathroom door and stepped back out into the open-plan living space. The air was thick with the savory aroma of the soup. "Feeling better?" Lucas asked, without turning around. He was grating Gruyere cheese now. "Much," I lied, walking over to the wine rack. I needed a prop. "Just a headache. I think the barometric pressure is getting to me." I leaned against the granite island, positioning myself so I could watch his face in the reflection of the dark window while appearing to look at the rain. It was time for the first probe. In cybersecurity, we call it social engineering, manipulating the human element to reveal a password or a vulnerability. "You know," I said casually, swirling the wine I still hadn't drunk. "This rain reminds me of that afternoon in the Maldives. Remember we got stuck in that little bungalow at the Four Seasons for 2 days because of the tropical storm?" I held my breath. We hadn't stayed at the Four Seasons. We had stayed at the one and only Rithi Ra. It was a specific, deliberate error. If he was an imposter who had simply memorized a dossier, he might agree to the generic detail. Lucas paused. He set the grater down and turned to look at me, a small, amused smile playing on his lips. "Isabel," he chided gently, "you really are tired. We didn't stay at the Four Seasons. We were at the Rithi Ra, and we weren't stuck for 2 days. It was 3. We survived on room service and that terrible local rum." My stomach dropped. He didn't just correct me. He added texture. He added the detail about the rum, which was true. We had laughed about that awful gasoline-tasting liquor for years. "Right," I managed to say, forcing a chuckle. "God, my memory is shot today. Of course, the Rithi Ra." My mind raced. How could he know that that wasn't in a public record? That wasn't on Instagram? That was a shared memory, stored in the private cloud of our marriage. Unless Lucas, the real Lucas, had briefed him. The thought made me nauseous. Just then, a flash of white fur darted across the terrace outside the glass doors. It was Mr. Jingles, the neighbor's Persian cat. He had a habit of squeezing through the gap in the partition between our balconies. "Oh, look who is here," Lucas said. He walked over to the sliding glass door and slid it open. The cat trotted in, shaking the rain from its fur. Normally, this would be the moment Lucas sneezed. My husband had a mild but consistent allergy to dander. Within minutes of being in the same room as a cat, his eyes would water, and he would start hunting for an antihistamine. But the man in front of me crouched down. He extended a hand, letting the wet, fluffy creature rub its face against his palm. He scratched the cat behind the ears, cooing softly. "Hey there, buddy. Getting wet out there." I watched, waiting for the sniffle, waiting for him to rub his eyes. Nothing. He picked the cat up, actually picked it up, and carried it back to the door, setting it gently outside before closing the glass. He wiped his hands on his trousers, completely unbothered. "Poor guy," he said, turning back to me. "The Millers really need to fix that fence." "Yeah," I said, my voice tight. "They do?" 1 point for the imposter theory. The memory was perfect, but the biology was wrong. Or maybe he had taken a shot. Maybe there was a cure I didn't know about. No. Lucas complained about that allergy constantly. It was his excuse for never getting me a dog. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, shielding the screen. A text from Elena. "He just kissed her. Her name is Camille." I heard him say it when he ordered her another drink. "For Camille, the lady with the amber eyes. Isabel. He is touching her face the way he used to touch yours. Camille." The name meant nothing to me, but the description of the intimacy felt like a physical blow. I looked at the man in my kitchen. He was plating the soup now, placing the toasted baguette slices on top of the broth with careful precision. "Dinner is served," he announced. We sat at the small round table by the window. The city lights of Seattle were a blurred kaleidoscope below us. I picked up my spoon, my hand trembling slightly. "You have been distant lately," I said, trying a different angle. "With all the travel for Ether, London, Tokyo, now, where was it next week, Berlin?" He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "Berlin, yes. But let's not talk about work. I know I have been away a lot. I know I have been distracted." He reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was firm, warm. "I miss this. I miss us. In fact," he lowered his voice, the tone shifting from domestic to something darker, more suggestive. "I was thinking, after dinner, maybe we could try something different tonight. I bought those silk ties you liked in that boutique in Soho. Remember?" I froze. We had never been to a boutique in Soho together, and the silk ties reference, that wasn't Lucas. Lucas was vanilla. His idea of adventurous was leaving the lights on. This man's eyes held a glint of hunger, a raw, predatory sexuality that felt completely alien to the gentle, somewhat awkward lover I had known for 7 years. "That sounds intense," I said, pulling my hand back under the pretense of reaching for my napkin. "Intense is good," he said, his gaze lingering on my neck. "We have gotten too comfortable. Isabel, maybe it is time to shake things up." I needed a sample. I needed biological proof. "I need water," I said, standing up abruptly. "This wine is going to my head." "I will get it." He started to rise. "No," I said, too loud. "Sit, please. I will get it. Do you want some?" "Sure," he said, leaning back in his chair. He gestured to his empty wine glass. "Just water for me, too." I walked to the kitchen island. I grabbed a fresh glass for myself, but my eyes were on his empty wine glass. The rim was stained with a faint residue of the red wine. Saliva, DNA. I had a rapid test pathogen kit in my work bag, standard issue for checking biological contaminants on hardware during site visits to secure facilities. It wasn't a full forensic lab, but it could match genetic markers if I had a baseline, and I had Lucas's baseline. We had done a full genetic screening 3 years ago when we were briefly considering IVF. The data was on my secure server. "Here," I said, handing him a glass of water. As I did, I accidentally knocked his empty wine glass off the table. It didn't break, it was heavy crystal, but it rolled onto the carpet. "Oops," I said. "Clumsy me. I will get it." I bent down, grabbing the glass by the stem, careful not to touch the rim. I slipped it into the deep pocket of my cardigan. "I will just put this in the sink," I said. I walked to the kitchen, but instead of the sink, I moved swiftly to the pantry where my work bag was stashed, hidden from his view by the refrigerator door. I pulled out the small, handheld analyzer. I swabbed the rim of the glass and inserted the strip into the device. Processing. The little screen blinked green. It would take 5 minutes. "Isabel," he called out. "Everything okay in there?" "Fine. Just looking for the dessert wine," I called back. I needed to distract him while the machine worked. I needed to test his knowledge of something only the real Lucas would know. Something physical. Something that required muscle memory. Not just a memorized fact. The gun safe. We had a biometric safe in the study, but it also had a keypad override. Lucas was the only one who used it. He kept a vintage Colt .45 in there, an inheritance from his grandfather. I walked back out. Actually, while I am up, I think I heard a noise on the terrace earlier. When Mr. Jingles came in, it sounded like someone trying the handle. He frowned. "On the 35th floor? That is impossible." "I know, but with the storm, maybe the wind. Can you just check? Maybe get the flashlight from the safe. I think the batteries in the kitchen one are dead." It was a weak pretext, but I watched him closely. "Sure," he said, standing up. "I will check." He walked toward the study. I followed, stopping in the doorway. He approached the safe hidden behind the painting of the stormy sea. He moved the painting aside. He stared at the keypad. He lifted his hand. His finger hovered over the numbers. The code was our wedding date: 10, 15, 18, 101518. He pressed 1, then 0, then he paused. His finger drifted to the 2. He stopped. He lowered his hand. He turned to me, his expression perfectly composed, but his eyes were hard. "You know," he said smoothly, "I actually changed the code last week. Security update. Too many birthdays and anniversaries are easy to guess." "Oh," I said, leaning against the doorframe, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "What did you change it to?" "It is a randomized sequence," he said, dismissing the question. "I will just use my phone light." He pulled his phone from his pocket and turned on the flashlight app. "I will go check the terrace." He walked past me, the heat of his body radiating as he brushed by. I stayed in the study. I looked at the safe. He didn't know the code. He hadn't changed it. He simply didn't know it. The real Lucas would never change that code without telling me. It was our fail-safe. My pocket vibrated. The analyzer. I pulled it out. The screen was glowing in the dim light of the study. Match probability. 99.9% identity confirmed, Lucas Merriweather. I stared at the screen. The breath knocked out of me. It was a match. The DNA was Lucas's, but he didn't sneeze at the cat. He didn't know the safe code. He wanted to try things in bed that my husband would never dream of, and my sister was watching another Lucas with a scar on his chin fly to Paris. How could he be Lucas and not be Lucas? The answer hit me with the force of a physical blow. A theory so terrifying I had pushed it to the back of my mind. Clones were science fiction, but twins. Twins were biology. Lucas was an only child. His parents had died in a car crash when he was 4. He had been raised by an aunt who passed away before we met. There was no family history I could verify, unless he wasn't an only child, or unless this wasn't a twin, unless this was something far more sinister. I looked at the match probability again. The device tested for specific markers. It wasn't a full genome sequence. It tested for a set of 12 markers. If someone had access to Lucas's medical records, which Ether Dynamics did, they could theoretically engineer a match for a limited test. Or more simply, they could have planted the DNA. I looked at the wine glass in my pocket. Had he actually drunk from it, or had he just touched it to his lips? I replayed the moment in my head. He had sipped. I saw his throat work. So the DNA was inside him. "Terrace is clear." His voice came from the living room. "Just the wind." "Honey," I put the analyzer away. This man was trained. He was modified. He was prepared. He had passed the memory test, the hotel. He had failed the biological test, the cat, but passed the DNA test. He had failed the security test, the safe. He was a patchwork of perfection and glaring errors, and that meant he was breakable. I walked back into the living room. He was standing by the window, watching the rain. The reflection of his face in the glass was ghostly. "You know," I said softly, coming up behind him but keeping my distance. "I think you are right. We should shake things up tonight." He turned, a slow smile spreading across his face. Yeah, I said. "But first, I have a little surprise for you. A gift." I needed to get him into the bedroom. I needed him vulnerable, and I needed access to his phone, the real one, not the prop he was using to check the time. "I love gifts," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "Go to the bedroom," I whispered. "Undress. I will be there in 2 minutes." He stared at me, searching my face for any sign of deception. I gave him the look I knew Lucas couldn't resist, a slight tilt of the chin, a lowering of the eyelids. "Don't make me wait," he said, and turned toward the hallway. As he walked away, I pulled out my phone. I opened the app for the hidden cameras again. I wasn't going to the bedroom to seduce him. I was going to the guest room, where I kept my go bag. Inside was a taser, a burner laptop, and a hard drive containing the encryption keys to everything Ether Dynamics owned. If this man was a copy, he was a very expensive one, and expensive things were usually insured. I needed to find out who held the policy. The game had changed. It wasn't just about finding my husband anymore. It was about surviving the man who had stolen his face. I did not go to the bedroom to slip into lingerie. I went to my home office, a converted guest room at the end of the hall that Lucas jokingly called the bunker. He did not know how accurate that nickname was. The door was reinforced steel disguised with a mahogany veneer, and the lock was a retina scanner that I had salvaged from a decommissioned government facility. I pressed my eye to the scanner. The mechanism whirred. A heavy, reassuring thud echoed, and the door slid open. I stepped inside and locked it behind me. The room was bathed in the cool blue glow of my server rack. This was my domain, out there, in the kitchen. I was a confused wife. In here, I was God. I sat down at my terminal, a custom-built rig with 3 monitors. My hands, which had been trembling holding the wine glass, were now steady. I cracked my knuckles and began to type. First, the location data. I pulled up the admin interface for our family cellular plan. It was a simple backdoor I had installed years ago, ostensibly to track our phones in case of theft, but primarily because I trusted no one. Not even the man I loved. "Locate device Lucas Primary," I commanded the system. The screen refreshed. A map of the world appeared. 2 red dots blinked into existence. One dot was pulsing steadily in Seattle, right here in this penthouse. The second dot was moving rapidly along the A1 highway, approaching Paris. My breath hitched. It was a digital impossibility. A single SIM card cannot be in 2 places at once unless someone is tunneling the signal. I ran a packet analysis on the Seattle signal. It was perfect. Too perfect. The latency was 0. It was a loop. A spoofed signal being broadcast from a localized device. The man in my kitchen was carrying a jammer that mimicked my husband's digital signature. "You are good," I whispered to the screen, "but you are not me." Next, physical verification. I accessed the external security node for Ether Dynamics. As the wife of the chief strategy officer, I did not have clearance. But as a hacker who had written the firewall code for their subsidiary 3 years ago, I had a skeleton key. I pulled up the surveillance logs for the past 72 hours. According to the official logs, Lucas Merriweather had entered the building every morning at 8:45. I pulled the video feed for those timestamps. I watched the footage. A man in a gray trench coat walked through the lobby turnstiles. He wore a hat pulled low and a scarf wrapped high. He kept his head down, avoiding the facial recognition scanners mounted near the elevators. He walked with a slight limp on his right side. "Wrong," I hissed. Lucas walked with a lead on his left foot. I fast-forwarded. The man never went to the executive suite on the 40th floor. He went to the server room on the sublevel. He stayed for 12 minutes, then left. He was not going to work. He was establishing a pattern of life. He was creating a digital alibi. I switched to the financial tracking software. If Lucas, the real Lucas, was in Paris, he needed resources. "You do not fly first class and stay at the Ritz on pocket change. I queried our joint accounts at Chase and Goldman Sachs. The screen flashed red. Alert. Unusual activity. I opened the transaction history. My vision blurred for a second. 3 hours ago, a wire transfer had been initiated. $20 million. It was everything. Our savings, his bonuses, the liquidation of our stock portfolio. It was gone. Destination, I typed, my fingers hitting the keys with bruising force. Beneficiary Nebula Holdings. Bank Cayman National. Jurisdiction Cayman Islands. Nebula Holdings. It sounded like a bad joke from a Bond movie. I ran a deep search on the shell company. It led to a dead end. A registered agent in Georgetown who probably managed thousands of fake companies. But the timing was unmistakable. The money moved exactly when Elena saw him on the plane. The man in the kitchen wasn't just an imposter, he was a distraction. He was the magician's left hand, waving a handkerchief while the right hand stole the watch. "Who is the girl?" I asked the empty room. I pulled up the photo Elena had sent me, the redhead, Camille. I cropped her face from the grainy image and ran it through a facial recognition software I had borrowed from the NSA database during a contract audit. The search bar spun. Searching. Match found. Name, Camille Russo. Occupation art dealer/broker. Flags Interpol watch list, money laundering. Antiquities trafficking. Camille Russo. She was known in intelligence circles as a cleaner for dirty money. She moved capital across borders by disguising it as high-value art transactions. If Lucas was with her, he wasn't having a midlife crisis affair. He was laundering the $20 million he had just stolen from us. But $20 million was a lot of money to run away with, yet not enough to destroy a life over. Not for Lucas. His unvested stock options at Ether were worth triple that. Why burn down the kingdom for the copper wiring, unless he wasn't just stealing money? I looked back at the Ether Dynamics footage, the fake Lucas in the server room. I accessed the data logs for that server room. System alert. Mass data exfiltration, core schematics, Project Zephyr. My blood turned to ice. Project Zephyr was Ether's crown jewel. It was a next-generation drone navigation system based on quantum computing. It was classified top secret by the Department of Defense. It was worth billions on the black market. China, Russia, Iran, any of them would pay a fortune for it. Lucas wasn't just a thief. He was a traitor. He was selling the core technology of his company. And he had set up an elaborate play to make it look like he was home in Seattle while he did the deal in Paris. But who was the man in my kitchen I needed Marcus? Marcus Vance was a former FBI field agent who had been burned by the Bureau for asking too many questions about a senator's son. Now, he ran a private investigation firm that specialized in the kind of problems you didn't take to the police. He owed me a favor for erasing a DUI from his daughter's record. I picked up my burner phone, a flip phone I kept taped under my desk, and dialed. He answered on the second ring. "This line is for emergencies only. Izzy." "This is an emergency," I said. My voice clipped. "I need an ID on a ghost. I am sending you a biometric profile now." I did not have the imposter's fingerprints, but I had something better. The DNA analyzer had saved the sequence data from the wine glass. Even though it matched Lucas, there had to be anomalies, minor markers, epigenetic drift. "I am sending you a sequence," I said. "It matches my husband, Lucas Merriweather, at 99%. I need you to find the 1% that doesn't." "You want me to find a clone?" Marcus asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. "I want you to find a relative, a cousin, a half-brother, someone who looks enough like him to fool a retina scanner, but not a wife." "Send it." I encrypted the file and fired it off. I waited. The silence in the room was oppressive. I checked the camera feed. The man, the imposter, was still in the living room. He was pouring himself another glass of wine. He looked at his watch. He was waiting for me. He thought I was in the bedroom putting on lingerie. 5 minutes passed. 10. My burner phone buzzed. "I have him," Marcus said. His tone was grim. "Izzy, you are not going to like this. Tell me, it is not a relative. The DNA match is high because he is a chimera. He has had bone marrow transplants, but the base markers, they belong to a guy named Julian Thorne. Who is Julian Thorne? Failed actor, washed out of Broadway 10 years ago, serious gambling debts. He disappeared off the grid 6 months ago. The word on the street was he volunteered for an experimental reconstructive surgery program in Mexico. Off-book stuff. Extreme modification. Plastic surgery. More than that, breaking the jaw to reshape it, vocal cord manipulation, skin grafting. They rebuilt this guy from the bone up, Izzy, and get this, his debts. $200,000 to a loan shark in Jersey paid off in full the day he vanished. Who paid it? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A shell company linked to Ether Dynamics. Marcus said, your husband bought him, Izzy. Lucas hired this guy. He paid off his debts, paid for the surgery, and stashed him somewhere to heal. Training, I whispered. He trained him. For 6 months, Marcus confirmed. I found a rental record for a secluded cabin in the Cascades, leased to Lucas. Thorne was there. They must have spent every day together. Lucas teaching him how to walk, how to talk, how to be him. The nausea returned, violent and sharp. It wasn't just betrayal. It was the intimacy of the violation. Lucas had dissected our marriage, cataloged our private moments, and taught them to a stranger like lines in a script. The try something new in bed that was Julian improvising. Or maybe a sick request from Lucas to keep me distracted. Why, I asked, why go to this length? The alibi, Marcus said. If Lucas is selling Project Zephyr in Paris, that is treason. That is life in Supermax. But if Lucas Merriweather is verified to be in his Seattle penthouse by his loving wife and digital footprint at the exact moment the sale happens, he is untouchable. He has the perfect defense. And what happens when the sale is done? I asked, looking at the image of Julian Thorne on my screen. Marcus paused. Izzy, guys like Julian Thorne are loose ends, and wives who can verify the alibi. They are witnesses. He is going to kill us, I said. The realization settled over me with a terrifying calm. Lucas is going to sell the tech, transfer the money, and then Julian is going to stage a murder-suicide, or a gas leak, or a break-in gone wrong. You need to get out of there, Marcus said. Right now. I can't, I said. If I leave, Julian alerts Lucas. They disappear with the money and the tech. I lose everything, and I will be the one framed for it. Izzy. I have to flip the script, I said. I have to trap the ghost. Suddenly, a heavy pounding echoed through the house. It wasn't the front door. It was the door to my office. I spun around in my chair. Isabel. Julian's voice came through the mahogany, muffled but distinct. It didn't sound like the gentle husband anymore. It sounded impatient. You have been in there a long time. Honey, the bedroom is the other way. I glanced at the camera feed. He was standing right outside the door. He wasn't holding a wine glass anymore. He was holding the fireplace poker. Open the door, Isabel, he said, and the handle jiggled violently against the lock. I am starting to get worried. I looked at the screen. The transfer to the Caymans was complete. The plane was descending into Paris, and the man outside my door knew the script was going off the rails. Just a second. Darling, I called out, my voice bright and fake. I am just looking for the massage oil. I grabbed the hard drive containing the evidence I had just gathered. I looked around for a weapon. My eyes landed on a heavy, solid-state server blade lying on my workbench. It wasn't a gun, but it was 5 pounds of sharp-edged metal. I stood up. Coming, I said. I walked toward the door. The game of cat and mouse was over. It was time for the predator to meet the prey. I slid the heavy steel server blade back onto the desk. It was too crude. If I attacked him now, I would be fighting a man desperate enough to undergo radical facial reconstruction for money. A physical confrontation was a coin toss I couldn't afford to lose. Instead, I reached into the hidden compartment of my desk drawer and pulled out a slim black tactical pen. To the untrained eye, it was a high-end writing instrument. To me, it was 50,000 volts of localized electricity. I slipped it into the sleeve of my cardigan, the cold metal resting against my wrist. "I am opening the door," I called out, injecting a tremor of vulnerability into my voice. I disengaged the locks. The heavy door hissed open. Julian, wearing my husband's face, my husband's cashmere sweater, and carrying the weight of a stolen life, stood there. He had lowered the fireplace poker, hastily tucking it behind his back when he heard the lock click. In his other hand, balanced precariously, was a small slate tray with 2 chocolate truffles. "Hey," he said, his voice soft. The menace from moments ago smoothed over with a layer of practiced concern. "I brought you these, dark chocolate and sea salt. Your favorite." He looked at me, scanning my face for suspicion. But what I saw in his eyes wasn't the cold calculation of a killer. It was fear. His pupils were dilated, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead despite the cool air of the hallway. He looked like an actor who had forgotten his lines in the middle of a live broadcast. "Thanks," I said, stepping back to let him in. I needed a moment. Work stuff. It is piling up." I walked over to the leather armchair in the corner of the office and sat down. Curling my legs under me, I needed to lower his defenses. I needed him to see me not as a threat, but as a problem to be solved. A bird with a broken wing. He set the truffles down on the desk, his eyes darting around the room at the servers, the screens, the hum of technology. He looked out of place, a man from an analog world trapped in a digital cage. "You work too hard, Isabel," he said, moving to stand near me. "Lucas, I worry about you." The slip was microscopic. He corrected it instantly, but the hesitation was there. "I know," I sighed, looking up at him through my lashes. "It is just the finances. Lucas, I saw the alert on the joint account." He froze. His hand, which had been reaching out to touch my shoulder, stopped in midair. "What alert?" "The transfer," I lied smoothly. "I know we are overextended on the new investment property. I saw the bank flagged a payment. Are we in trouble?" I watched him process this. I was giving him an out. I was offering him a narrative where he wasn't an imposter. But a husband hiding financial ruin, if he took the bait, it meant he wasn't ready to kill me yet. He exhaled, a long, shuddering breath. He sat down on the edge of the desk, his posture slumping. "Yeah," he said, his voice rough. "Yeah, Izzy, it is complicated. The market shifted. I had to move some things around. I didn't want to worry you." As he spoke, his right hand drifted to his left thumb. He began to crack the knuckle, a sharp, repetitive pop, pop, pop. My eyes locked onto the movement. Lucas had perfect hands. He treated them like instruments. He never cracked his knuckles. But Julian Thorne, the failed actor with gambling debts. This was his tell. This was the nervous tick of a man who was drowning. "I am sorry," he said, looking at the floor. "I just wanted everything to be perfect for us." He sounded so genuine, and that was the terrifying part. In that moment, he wasn't playing Lucas. He was channeling his own desperation, his own failure, and wrapping it in my husband's voice. He was a man who had sold his face to pay his debts, and now he was realizing the cost was higher than he thought. "It is okay," I said softly, reaching out to touch his knee. "We can fix it. We are a team, right?" He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped completely. I saw a flash of profound guilt. "Right," he whispered. "A team." He stood up abruptly, pulling away from my touch as if it burned. I need to use the restroom. The chocolate. Eat the chocolate. It will help." He turned and walked out of the office, heading for the guest bathroom down the hall. The moment he was gone, I moved. He had left his suit jacket draped over the back of the chair when he came in a habit Lucas never had. Lucas hung everything up immediately. I reached into the inside pocket. My fingers brushed against a blister pack. I pulled it out. Diazepam, 10 milligrams, a heavy sedative, The foil was broken on 2 pills. Behind the pills was a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases. I unfolded it. It was a handwritten cheat sheet. Coffee black, 2 sugars, hates cream. Sleep left side of bed, needs white noise machine. Trigger. Don't mention her mother, touch likes neck rubs, hates feet being touched. Password hint for iPad. Name of first pet buster. It was a study guide to my life. Seeing my intimacy reduced to bullet points made bile rise in my throat, but at the bottom of the page, scribbled in a different ink, darker and more frantic, was a note. Be gentle. She is fragile. Don't hurt her unless necessary. I stared at the words. Don't hurt her unless necessary. Julian Thorne didn't want to hurt me. He was trying to sedate me. The truffles. He had probably drugged the chocolate. He wanted me asleep, so he wouldn't have to look me in the eye while he waited for the order to end me. He wasn't a monster. He was a coward. And cowards could be manipulated. I heard the toilet flush. I shoved the pills and the note back into the jacket pocket and sat back down, picking up a truffle. I pretended to take a bite, then hid the chocolate in my palm, slipping it into my pocket. When Julian returned, he looked washed out, his face pale. Did you eat it? He asked, his eyes fixing on my empty hand. I said, faking a yawn. It was delicious, but you are right. I am feeling incredibly heavy all of a sudden. Relief washed over his face. It was pathetic how transparent he was. You should rest, he said eagerly. Why don't you take a hot bath? I will clean up the kitchen. That sounds wonderful. I slurred my words slightly. Will you help me with the water? Of course, he said. We walked to the master bathroom. I leaned heavily against him, letting him take my weight. He smelled of Lucas's cologne, but underneath, there was the metallic tang of fear sweat. In the bathroom, he turned on the taps, adjusting the temperature. There, he said. Nice and hot. Lucas, I said, grabbing his arm. My phone. I left it in the kitchen. Can you get it? I want to play my meditation playlist. Sure, he said. I will be right back. He left the room. I waited 3 seconds, then reached down to the floor where he had kicked off his loafers. Marcus had told me Julian was a gambler. Gamblers always have a backup. I felt inside the left shoe. Nothing. I checked the right shoe. I felt a hard, rectangular shape under the insole. I pried it out. A burner phone. Not the one he used as Lucas. This was a cheap, prepaid device. I didn't need the passcode. It was already unlocked. The screen dim but active. I opened the messages. There was only one contact director. The last message had come in 10 minutes ago. Director, she is suspicious. Elena called her. Did you drug her? Julian, yes. She is eating the chocolate now. She thinks it is financial stress. Director, good. Keep her under until Monday morning. The transfer clears at 9 a.m. Zurich time. Once the money is confirmed, cut the gas line in the kitchen. Make it look like an accident. 50,000 bonus if she doesn't suffer. I stared at the screen. Cut the gas line. Lucas, my husband, the man who had vowed to protect me, had ordered my execution via text message. He didn't just want me dead. He wanted me erased. An accidental casualty to cover his escape, and he was offering a bonus for mercy. How generous. I quickly took a photo of the screen with my tactical pen's hidden camera, then slid the phone back under the insole. I stood up and looked in the mirror. My reflection was calm, terrifyingly so. I could expose Julian right now. I could tase him, tie him up, and call the police. But if I did that, Lucas would know. He would see the arrest on the news or lose contact with his puppet. He would disappear with the money and the tech. He would vanish into the shadow economy. And I would spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder. No, I needed Lucas to come back. I needed him to walk through that door thinking he had won. And to do that, I needed Julian Thorne. I needed to turn the puppet against the master. I heard Julian's footsteps returning. I quickly stripped off my cardigan and sat on the edge of the tub, dipping my hand into the water. He walked in, holding my phone. Here you go, he said. Thanks, I whispered, my eyes drooping. You are so good to me. Lucas. He flinched. The guilt was eating him alive. Isabel, he started, his voice cracking. Shh, I said, reaching out and taking his hand. I pulled him closer. I trust you. I know you would never let anything bad happen to me. I looked deep into his eyes, the eyes that had been surgically altered to match my husband's. I saw the conflict raging there. He was a desperate man, not a killer. He was in over his head, trapped between a psychopath and a victim he was starting to care for. I am going to close my eyes, I murmured. Stay close. I will be right outside, he said, his voice barely a whisper. He turned and walked out, closing the door softly. I waited until I heard his footsteps recede. Then I turned off the tap. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to rewrite the ending of this play. Julian Thorne thought he was the actor, but he was about to learn that I was the director, and the first act was just beginning. While I was sitting on the edge of my bathtub in Seattle, plotting survival, 5,000 miles away in Paris, my sister Elena was ordering a €20 espresso she didn't intend to drink. She sat in the lobby lounge of the Ritz Paris, obscured by a large potted palm and a copy of Le Monde. Across the room, under the crystal chandeliers, my husband Lucas, the real one, was holding court. He looked magnificent and monstrous. He wore a bespoke tuxedo, his arm draped casually over the back of the velvet sofa where Camille sat. She was radiant in emerald silk, laughing at something the third person at the table said. The third person was a man with cold, reptilian eyes and a tailored suit that cost more than most people's houses. Elena recognized him from a threat briefing file she had once seen during a transport contract for NATO. Viktor Volkov, an arms dealer who specialized in things that made governments nervous. Elena adjusted the directional microphone disguised as a fountain pen in her breast pocket. The audio feed crackled in her earpiece, cutting through the ambient piano music. The transfer is initiated, Lucas was saying, his voice smooth, devoid of any guilt. The source code for Project Zephyr is currently being mirrored to your secure server in Zurich. Decryption keys will follow upon receipt of the second tranche. And the traceability? Volkov asked, his accent thick with Russian gravel. I do not want the NSA knocking on my door because you left a digital breadcrumb. Lucas laughed, a sound that chilled Elena to the bone. Don't worry, Victor. The beauty of this operation isn't the theft. It is the frame. Every single access log, every unauthorized download, every breach of the firewall is originating from a specific IP address in Seattle, my home IP address. Camille leaned in, tracing the rim of her champagne flute. Poor Isabel, she purred. She is so talented with computers. It makes perfect sense that she would be the one to crack Ether's security, the genius hacker wife, frustrated by her husband's long hours. Decides to sell secrets to pay off. What shall we say? Gambling debts, a secret lover. Exactly. Lucas nodded, taking a sip of his drink. When the breach is discovered, which will be in approximately 4 hours, the trail will lead straight to her laptop. By the time the feds kick down the door, Julian will have given his statement. He will testify that he saw her working late nights, acting paranoid, hiding hard drives. And Julian, Volkov asked. He is a loose end. Julian thinks he is getting a payout, Lucas shrugged. He doesn't know the gas line in the penthouse is faulty. A tragic explosion. The grieving husband returns from his business trip to find his home destroyed and his traitorous wife dead by her own incompetence. I play the victim, collect the insurance, and retire to the villa in Tuscany with you. My dear. Elena felt bile rise in her throat. It wasn't just theft. It was a complete annihilation of her sister's character, life, and legacy. Lucas was going to paint Isabel as a traitor to her country and then murder her to seal the narrative. She slowly stood up, leaving the untouched espresso and a €50 note. She walked calmly to the ladies' room, locked herself in a stall, and pulled out her encrypted satellite phone. Back in Seattle. My phone vibrated. I was still in the bathroom, the water in the tub growing cold. I picked it up. Elena, I answered. Isabel. Her voice was shaking with rage. I heard everything. It is worse than we thought. He is selling Zephyr to Viktor Volkov for 100 million, and you are the patsy. She relayed the conversation word for word, the IP address, the frame job, the gas leak. He is coming back on Monday not to discover the crime, but to bury you, Elena said. Isabel, you need to leave, now. Forget the plan. Just run. If I run, I look guilty, I said, my voice dangerously calm. If I run, the logs still point to me. I will be a fugitive for the rest of my life. The only way out is through. What are you going to do? I am going to change the narrative, I said. Lucas thinks he is writing a tragedy. I am going to turn it into a noir thriller. I hung up. I had work to do. I slipped out of the bathroom and moved silently back to my office. The house was quiet. Julian was likely in the living room, watching TV, waiting for me to wake up from my drugged nap. I sat at my terminal. Lucas said the breach would be discovered in 4 hours. That meant the data transfer was happening now. He was routing it through my router. Using a VPN tunnel he must have pre-configured on my system. I scanned my network traffic. There it was, a massive stream of encrypted data flowing outbound. Destination Zurich. Source my terminal. He was using my own machine against me. I could cut the connection, but that would alert him. Volkov would know the transfer stopped. Lucas would panic and trigger the clean up early. Julian would come through that door with a knife instead of chocolate. No, I had to let the transfer continue. But I had to change the payload. I opened a coding interface. My fingers flew across the mechanical keyboard. I accessed the data stream. I couldn't decrypt the Zephyr files, they were locked with Ether's quantum keys, but I could wrap them. I created a honeypot wrapper. To Lucas and Volkov, the file size and encryption signature would look identical. They would see the progress bar hit 100%. They would think they had the weapon. But inside the wrapper, I embedded a logic bomb. The moment they tried to decrypt the files with the key Lucas provided, the bomb would detonate. It wouldn't explode their server. It would do something far worse. It would broadcast their GPS coordinates, their IP addresses, and a copy of the stolen data directly to Interpol, the CIA, and the FSB. I was turning the stolen goods into a tracking beacon. Upload complete, I whispered as I hit enter. Now, I had to deal with the man in the living room. I checked the camera feed. Julian was pacing. He was agitated. He kept checking his phone. Lucas must be pressuring him. Is she asleep? Is the gas line prepped? I needed to extract the truth from him. Not just what he knew, but who he was. I needed a confession on tape. Something that would exonerate me and damn Lucas. But Julian was on edge. A direct confrontation might make him snap. I needed him compliant. I remembered the bottle of vintage absinthe in the liquor cabinet. It was high proof, illegal in some states, and laced with wormwood. But I had something better, in my go bag, alongside the taser. I had a small vial of sodium thiopental, truth serum. It wasn't magic, it didn't make people unable to lie, but it lowered inhibitions, made the brain groggy, and made the path of least resistance the truth. It was a relic from a gray market consulting gig I did in Eastern Europe years ago. I walked to the kitchen. Julian jumped when he saw me. Isabel, he stammered. I thought you were sleeping. I tried, I said, rubbing my temples. But my mind is racing. The financial stuff. I can't shut it off. I walked to the liquor cabinet. I need a drink. A real one. Will you join me? Please. Lucas, I don't want to be alone right now. I pulled out the absinthe and 2 glasses. I poured a generous shot for myself and one for him. With my back turned, I slipped the clear liquid from the vial into his glass. It dissolved instantly. Here, I said, turning and handing him the glass. To new beginnings. He looked at the glass, then at me. He was suspicious. I shouldn't. I have a headache. Please, I said, my voice trembling. Just one, to calm my nerves. I feel like my world is falling apart. Lucas, I need my husband. The guilt flickered across his face again. He hated seeing me like this. He hated what he was doing. "Okay," he said softly. "One drink." He took the glass. We clinked. "To us," he said, and downed it in one swallow. The drug acted fast when mixed with high-proof alcohol. Within 10 minutes, his pupils dilated. His movements became sluggish. He sat heavily on the sofa, loosening his tie. "Whoa," he mumbled. "That stuff kicks." "It does," I said, sitting opposite him. "Lucas, tell me about Paris, the trip you are planning next week. Tell me about the art." He blinked, confused. "I don't know anything about art. Camille knows art. She likes the old stuff." "Camille?" I asked innocently. "Who is Camille?" He froze. His brain tried to erect the firewall, but the chemical sledgehammer had already knocked it down. She is the broker," he slurred. "She moves the money. Pretty, dangerous." "And what are you moving?" "Lucas." I leaned in, my voice sharp. "Zephyr," he whispered. "The wind. We are selling the wind." "Why, money," he laughed, a dry, bitter sound. 100 million. Enough to disappear. Enough to buy a new face." He looked at me, his eyes unfocused. "I have a new face. Izzy, do you like it? It cost a lot." "It is a handsome face," I said. "But it isn't yours. Is it, Julian?" The name hung in the air. He stopped breathing for a second. Clarity struggled to push through the fog. Who told you that name?" "You did." I lied. "Just now." He shook his head violently. No. I am Lucas. I am Lucas Merriweather. I like jazz. I hate cats. I love you." "Lucas doesn't love me," I said, standing up. "Lucas wants to kill me. He told you to cut the gas line, didn't he?" Julian looked up at me, tears forming in his eyes. "I wasn't going to do it. I swear. I was going to warn you. Maybe, I don't know. I am scared. Izzy, he owns me." "He doesn't own you," I said. "He rented you, and the lease just expired." I reached under the coffee table where I had taped my Sig Sauer P365 earlier. I pulled it out and racked the slide. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I placed the gun on the table, barrel pointed away from him, but within my reach. "We need to talk about your performance." "Julian," I said, my voice steel. "Because the third act just got rewritten, and you have a choice to make. You can be the villain who dies in the explosion, or you can be the hero who helps the widow get justice." He stared at the gun, then at me. The drug made him pliable, but the fear made him honest. "He will kill me," Julian whispered. "He is 5,000 miles away," I said. "I am right here, and I am the one holding the gun." I sat back down, crossing my legs. "Now, tell me everything. Start with the bank accounts." The gun sat on the coffee table between us. A black, matte, ugly thing that seemed to suck the light out of the room. Julian Thorne stared at it, his breathing shallow and rapid. The sodium thiopental was stripping away his defenses layer by layer, dissolving the carefully constructed persona of Lucas Merriweather until only a terrified, broken actor remained. "He found me in Queens," Julian whispered, his voice slurring slightly but the words tumbling out with the desperate need for purging. "I was doing community theater. Death of a Salesman. I was playing Biff. Lucas sat in the front row 3 nights in a row. I thought he was a talent scout." He let out a jagged, hysterical laugh. "He took me to dinner at a diner on Broadway. He didn't ask about my acting range. He asked about my bone structure. He asked about my debts. He knew I owed $40,000 to a loan shark in Jersey. He knew I was 2 months away from eviction. So he bought you," I said, my voice flat. "He commissioned me," Julian corrected, tears leaking from his eyes. "Like a painting. He sent me to a clinic in Mexico City. I spent 6 weeks with my jaw wired shut after they broke it to match his. They shaved my cheekbones, Isabel. They used lasers to burn off my fingerprints and scar my skin to match his. I looked at the scar under his chin, the one Elena had seen on the plane, the one I had seen in my kitchen. It wasn't a scar from a sailing accident, it was surgical forgery. He made me study you, Julian continued, looking at me with a mixture of shame and reverence. He had hours of video footage, hidden cameras in the apartment. I watched you sleep. I watched you work. I had to learn your rhythms. He tested me every day. If I got your coffee order wrong, he would withhold my pain medication. He wanted perfection. He got it, I said. You were good, Julian, almost too good. I wanted the money, he sobbed. $2 million, that was the deal. Enough to disappear to Thailand. Enough to be someone else. I reached for the burner phone I had taken from his shoe. I unlocked it and navigated to the message thread with the director. You think you are getting $2 million? I asked. He promised, Julian said, like a child clinging to a fairy tale. Read this, I commanded, shoving the phone into his hand. He blinked, struggling to focus through the drug-induced haze. He read the text I had seen earlier about the gas line, but I swiped to the next one. A message that had arrived while he was in the bathroom, one I hadn't had time to process until now. Director, once the gas line is cut, place the body in the bedroom. Then stop being his puppet and start being my partner, I said. I leaned forward, my eyes locking onto his. Lucas thinks he is the writer of this story, but he is working off an old script. I am rewriting the ending, Julian, but I need you to play the role of your life. What? What do you want me to do? I am going to get you out of this, I said. I have resources Lucas doesn't know about. I can get you a new identity, a real one, not a stolen one. And money, not 2 million, 5 million, taken from the account Lucas is trying to steal. 5 million? Julian's eyes widened. But you have to do exactly what I say. No improvising, no hesitation. Are you in? He looked at the gun, then at the phone, then at me. He nodded slowly. I am in. Good, I said. Now, fix your hair. You have a video call to make. 10 minutes later, the stage was set. We were in the living room. I had positioned Julian on the sofa, with the dim city lights of Seattle behind him. I sat on the floor, just out of the camera's frame, holding a whiteboard and a tablet connected to my server. He is calling, Julian whispered, staring at the ringing iPad on the coffee table. Answer it, I hissed. Remember, you are Lucas. You are arrogant. You are in control. And you think I am asleep. Julian took a deep breath. He cracked his knuckles, his tell, then stopped himself. He smoothed his features into the mask of my husband. He tapped the green icon. The screen filled with the face of Lucas Merriweather. Seeing them both at the same time was a vertigo-inducing nightmare. The man on the screen was in a hotel suite in Paris, wearing a silk robe, a glass of champagne in his hand. The man on my sofa was his mirror image, wearing a cashmere sweater. Report, Lucas said, his voice crisp. She is out cold, Julian said. His voice was steady, the British accent perfect. The truth serum had made him loose, but the adrenaline of survival had sharpened his focus. I crushed 3 pills into the chocolate. She won't wake up until noon tomorrow. And the transfer, Lucas asked. I checked her terminal, Julian lied, reading the words I had scribbled on the whiteboard. The honeypot is active. She thinks she stopped the breach, but she actually opened the back door wider. The data is flowing. Lucas smiled. It was a cruel, satisfied smile. Excellent. You see, Julian, I told you she was predictable. She thinks like a firewall. She doesn't understand that the threat is already inside the perimeter. I typed furiously on my tablet. I was monitoring the network traffic. Lucas was initiating the final handshake for the sale. He was sending the decryption keys for Project Zephyr to Viktor Volkov's server. I am seeing the confirmation now, Lucas said, looking off screen at his own laptop. $100 million, pending clearance. When do I get my share? Julian asked. This line wasn't on the whiteboard. It was a risk, but it was exactly what a greedy accomplice would ask. Lucas's eyes narrowed slightly. Patience, my friend. The money has to route through 3 jurisdictions to be clean. You will see your cut on Monday. Just focus on the final step, the gas line. Have you located the wrench? Julian swallowed. I pointed the gun at him from the floor. A silent reminder of who held his fate. I have it, Julian said. I will do it at 4 a.m, lowest traffic, maximum impact. Good man, Lucas said. You are doing me a great service. I won't forget it. I know you won't, Julian said, and there was a dark double meaning in his voice that Lucas missed entirely. I have to go, Lucas said. Camille is waiting. Au revoir. The screen went black. Julian slumped back against the sofa, letting out a long, ragged exhale. Did I do it? Was that okay? You were perfect, I said, standing up. Now, move. I need the main console. I took his place on the sofa, placing my laptop on the coffee table. The real magic was happening now. Lucas thought the $100 million was moving from the buyer's account in Zurich to his shell company in the Caymans. And on his screen, it looked like it was, I had created a mirror interface, a man-in-the-middle attack that fed his computer false confirmation data. But in reality, I was rerouting the packet headers. I wasn't sending the money to the Caymans. I was sending it to a holding account controlled by the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. It was a black hole account Marcus had given me access to years ago for a sting operation. What are you doing? Julian asked, watching my fingers fly across the keys. I am robbing the bank robbers, I said. Lucas is getting a confirmation receipt. Volkov is getting a file that looks like Project Zephyr, but is actually 3 terabytes of uncompressed cat videos encrypted to look like military code. And the money. The money is going into federal custody. But my $5 million, Julian stammered. You said, I am skimming it, I said without looking up. Before the funds hit the FBI lockbox, I am peeling off 5%. It is dirty money. Julian, it will wash through a crypto tumbler in Estonia and land in a cold wallet in your pocket before sunrise. It was risky. Stealing evidence was a felony, but I needed Julian's cooperation. And frankly, I felt entitled to a severance package for my marriage. Enter. The progress bar hit 100%. Done, I said. On my screen, a green checkmark appeared. The theft was complete. The money was gone. Lucas was broke. Volkov had a fake weapon, and the FBI just got the biggest donation in their history. But then, I saw something strange. I was monitoring the data packets leaving Volkov's server, the payment source. The main stream of 100 million had gone where I sent it, but there was a secondary stream. A thin, hidden trickle of data that was siphoning off a small percentage of the transaction fee. It wasn't going to Lucas. It wasn't going to Volkov. It was routing to a private bank in Monaco. Isabel, Julian asked, what is wrong? Someone else is stealing, I murmured. Look at this code. I highlighted the script. It was elegant, subtle. It was embedded in the transaction layer. Designed to look like a currency exchange fee, but it was too high. 3%. $3 million was being skimmed off the top before the main transfer even initiated. I traced the beneficiary. The account holder was hidden behind layers of shell companies, but the digital signature on the script, I recognized it. It used a specific variable naming convention referencing French Impressionist painters. Monet, Degas, Renoir. Camille, I whispered. Julian frowned. The art dealer. She isn't just his girlfriend, I said, a dark smile forming on my lips. She is playing him too. She rigged the deal to skim $3 million off the top. Lucas thinks he is the mastermind, but he is surrounded by sharks. This changed things. It meant the alliance in Paris was fragile. If I could expose Camille's theft to Volkov or to Lucas, they would turn on each other. Chaos was my ladder. What does that mean for us? Julian asked. It means we have leverage, I said. But first, we have to survive the night. I looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2 a.m. on Saturday. We had 48 hours until Lucas returned. 48 hours to turn this apartment from a crime scene into a stage. "Get some sleep, Julian," I said. "You take the guest room. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer, but give me the gun." He hesitated, then handed me the pistol. "You aren't going to shoot me while I sleep, are you?" "If I wanted you dead, I would have let you eat the chocolate," I said. He nodded, looking exhausted and small. He shuffled off toward the guest room, a man wearing a $1 million face and carrying a 10-cent soul. I sat alone in the living room, the gun on the table, the laptop humming. Sunday passed in a blur of preparation. I didn't sleep. I spent the day coding, setting up the digital evidence trail that would exonerate me. I planted files on Lucas's home server emails to Camille, discussing the frame-up, chat logs with Volkov haggling over the price. I was retroactively creating the truth. I also coached Julian. We rehearsed his role for Monday morning. He had to be Lucas until the very last second. He had to be the loving husband, the shocked victim, the confused innocent. By Sunday night, the tension in the penthouse was thick enough to choke on. The rain had stopped, leaving the Seattle skyline scrubbed clean and sharp. "He is boarding," Elena texted me at 8 p.m. Flight 447, Paris to Seattle. "He looks happy." "Izzy, he is drinking champagne again." "Enjoy it while it lasts, darling," I whispered to the phone. I looked at Julian, who was pacing the living room. He was wearing Lucas's favorite navy suit. He looked perfect. "Are you ready?" I asked. "No," he said honestly, "but I don't think I have a choice." "Just remember the signal," I said. "When I say the word curtain, you drop the act. Until then, you are Lucas Merriweather." "Curtain," he repeated. Monday morning arrived with a pale, gray dawn. The city woke up below us, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the penthouse. At 7:30, the elevator chimed. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it, the collision of realities. The doors slid open. Lucas, the real Lucas, stepped out. He was tanned, rested, and glowing with the triumph of a man who believes he has committed the perfect crime. Camille was on his arm, looking bored and expensive. He dropped his bags in the foyer and walked into the living room, a wide, theatrical smile on his face. He expected to find rubble. He expected to find police tape and charred walls. He expected to play the grieving widower. Instead, he found a party. The room was full. I had invited the entire board of directors of Ether Dynamics for a surprise breakfast briefing. They were holding coffees and pastries, chatting quietly, and standing in the center of the room, holding a glass of orange juice, was Lucas Merriweather, my Julian. The real Lucas froze in the doorway. His smile faltered, then vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, incomprehensible horror. He looked at the man in the center of the room. Then he looked at me, standing by the window in my red dress. I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. "Welcome home, honey," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. "We have been waiting for you." The apartment smelled of lemon oil and deception. We spent the better part of Sunday erasing the evidence of my mental breakdown and Julian's interrogation. The glass with the dissolved truth serum was washed, dried, and placed back in the cabinet. The tactical pen was returned to my desk. The whiteboard where I had mapped out the destruction of my husband's life was wiped clean, leaving only a faint, ghostly smudge of red marker. Julian moved through the penthouse with a nervous energy that I had to constantly check. He was scrubbing counters that were already clean, fluffing pillows that were perfectly aligned. "Stop," I said, catching his wrist as he reached for the Windex for the third time. "You are scrubbing away the fingerprints of the man you are supposed to be. Lucas isn't compulsive. He is effortless. If the house looks too sterile, it looks like a crime scene." Julian dropped the cloth, his hands shaking. "I feel like I'm waiting for the executioner." "You are the executioner, Julian," I corrected him, my voice calm and steady. "Lucas is the one walking to the gallows. He just doesn't know he has a rope around his neck yet." I turned my attention to the guest list. A trap. to be effective, requires bait, but it also requires an audience. A crime committed in the dark is a tragedy. A crime exposed in the light is justice. I picked up my phone and dialed the private line of Robert Sterling, the chairman of the board for Ether Dynamics. "Robert," I said, infusing my voice with the bubbly, slightly manic energy of a proud wife. "I know this is incredibly last minute, but Lucas is flying back from Paris tonight. He has news, big news, regarding Project Zephyr." "Isabel." Robert sounded confused. "I thought Zephyr was in the quiet phase. We aren't scheduled for a briefing until next quarter." "That is why we are celebrating." I lowered my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "He secured the partnership, the big one. The European Consortium. He wants to surprise the inner circle before the official press release tomorrow. 8 o'clock. At the penthouse. I have already called catering." It was the kind of lie corporate sharks love to swallow. It promised exclusivity, profit, and the thrill of knowing something before the market opened. Robert agreed immediately. Within an hour, I had confirmations from the CFO, the lead legal counsel, and 2 key investors. Next, I called Marcus. "The stage is set," I told him. "The audience is confirmed." "My team is ready," Marcus replied. "We will be there at 7:30. We are coming in as private equity consultants, plain clothes, concealed carry. But Izzy, if this goes sideways, if Lucas smells a rat and has a backup plan—" "He won't," I said. "He thinks I am comatose in the master bedroom. He thinks Julian is prepping a gas leak. His arrogance is his blind spot." "And the physical evidence?" Marcus asked. "The digital trail is good, but juries like things they can hold." "Elena is landing in 20 minutes, I said. "She has the souvenir." My sister arrived at the penthouse looking like she had flown through a hurricane. Her uniform was crisp, but her eyes were rimmed with red exhaustion. She didn't say a word when she walked in. She simply marched to the kitchen island, reached into her flight bag, and slammed a heavy silver hard drive onto the granite. "Room 304 at the Ritz," Elena said, pouring herself a glass of water. "I bribed the housekeeping staff €200 to let me in to turn down the bed. Lucas keeps his travel safe code as his birthday. Amateur." I picked up the drive. It was an encrypted SSD, military grade. "You swapped it." "Replaced it with an identical dummy drive I bought at an electronics store in the Marais." Elena smirked tiredly. "He is carrying a paperweight back to Seattle. This is the real deal. I copied the partition before I left. It contains the raw source code for Zephyr and the chat logs with Viktor Volkov." "You are a terrifying woman, Elena Merriweather," I said, feeling a surge of fierce love for my sister. "I learned from the best," she said, nodding at me. Then she looked at Julian, who was standing awkwardly by the window. "So, this is the clone." Julian flinched. I am helping." "You better be," Elena said, her voice dropping to a growl. "Because if you blink wrong tonight, I will throw you off this balcony myself." By 6 o'clock on Monday evening, the atmosphere in the penthouse was charged with static electricity. Outside, the Seattle rain had returned, a relentless drumbeat against the glass that isolated us from the world. I stood in my dressing room, staring at the woman in the mirror. I had chosen my outfit with the precision of a soldier selecting armor. It was a red silk dress, structured and sharp, the color of a fresh wound, the color of warning. It clung to my frame like a second skin. I applied my lipstick a shade darker than blood and pulled my hair back into a severe, elegant chignon. Tonight, I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the hacker. I was the wife. I checked the smart home interface on my tablet. System status secure, perimeter armed, lockdown protocol standby. I had reprogrammed the entire penthouse. The moment I gave the voice command to curtain, the electronic locks on the front door and the elevator access would engage. The blackout shades would descend. The cellular jammer I had installed in the ceiling would activate. cutting off all signals except for the localized Wi-Fi network I controlled. Lucas was going to walk into a cage. My phone buzzed. A text from the real Lucas. Landed. Customs was a breeze. Be there in 40 minutes. Is everything prepped? I handed the phone to Julian. Reply to him. Julian took the phone, his hands sweating. He typed, "All set. She is still out. Gas tool is ready. Waiting for you to clear the area before I spark it. It was the final nail." Lucas believing he was coming home to a murder scene. "He is coming," Julian whispered. "Good," I said. "Now, put on your game face. The guests are arriving." The doorbell rang. For the next hour, I watched a surreal play unfold. The board members of Ether Dynamics mingled in my living room, drinking my scotch and eating canapes, completely unaware that they were standing on a trapdoor. Julian was magnificent. He moved among them with Lucas's confident swagger, laughing at the chairman's bad jokes, discussing market trends with the CFO. He tapped his finger on his glass tap. Tap, tap, just like Lucas. He tilted his head when he listened. He was a mirror image so perfect it made my skin crawl. Marcus and his team, 4 agents dressed in expensive suits, circulated quietly, positioning themselves near the exits and the windows. They looked like investors, but their eyes were constantly scanning, their hands hovering near their waistbands. I stood by the fireplace, the red dress blazing against the gray stone, playing the role of the gracious hostess. "Lucas seems energized," Robert Sterling said, coming up beside me. "Paris must have been good for him." "Oh, it was transformative, Robert," I said, smiling over the rim of my champagne flute. "He is coming back a new man. You won't believe what he has accomplished." "And this breakthrough?" Robert asked, leaning in. "Can you give me a hint?" "Let's just say," I murmured, "that he has found a way to make assets disappear and reappear in the most unexpected places." Robert laughed, thinking it was a metaphor for liquidity. "That is our Lucas." "Yes," I agreed. "That is him." My smartwatch vibrated against my wrist. Proximity alert. Target vehicle at entrance. "He is here," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but Julian heard it from across the room. He froze mid-sentence, his eyes darting to me. I gave him a subtle nod. "Showtime." Julian excused himself from the CFO and moved to the center of the room. Near the large coffee table, where we had set up the projector for the presentation, I moved to the wall panel that controlled the smart home system. The elevator hummed. The sound grew louder, ascending 35 floors. The conversation in the room died down as people turned toward the foyer. Expecting the man of the hour, ding, the doors slid open. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, pneumatic hiss, revealing the man who believed he owned the world. Lucas Merriweather stepped into the foyer of his own penthouse, expecting silence, darkness, and perhaps the faint, acrid smell of a gas leak. Instead, he walked into a wall of sound and light. The crystal chandelier was blazing, the fireplace was crackling, and the air smelled of expensive scotch and hors d'oeuvres. He froze, his hand still gripping the handle of his leather briefcase, the knuckles white. Rainwater dripped from the hem of his navy trench coat, creating a dark, jagged puddle on the marble floor beside him. Camille stood like a deer caught in headlights, her white coat damp, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the impossible scene. "Surprise," I had said, but the word hung in the air, unanswered. Lucas took 2 steps forward, his eyes scanning the room. He saw the CFO, James Miller, holding a shrimp cocktail. He saw the legal counsel, Sarah Jenkins, mid-laugh. He saw the private equity sharks, my disguised FBI agents lining the perimeter. And then, he saw the man standing next to the chairman of the board, Julian Thorne, wearing my husband's favorite charcoal suit, wearing my husband's face, and holding a glass of vintage Bordeaux, turned slowly to face the intruder. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He simply raised an eyebrow, a gesture of arrogant curiosity that was so perfectly Lucas it made my breath hitch. "Robert," Julian said, his voice smooth and projecting easily across the silent room. "It seems we have a party crasher. Did you invite the entertainment?" The silence that descended on the room was absolute. It was a physical weight, pressing down on everyone's chest. Robert Sterling, the chairman, looked from Julian to Lucas, then back to Julian. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He looked like a man trying to process a glitch in the Matrix. "Who the hell are you?" Lucas roared. The sound tore through the polite atmosphere like a gunshot. He dropped the briefcase, the heavy thud echoing against the floor. "What is this? Who are you?" Julian took a calm sip of his wine. "I am Lucas Merriweather," he said, stepping forward, placing himself protectively between the guests and the intruder. "And I think the better question is, who are you, and why are you wearing a cheap knockoff of my coat?" "I am Lucas," the real Lucas screamed, his face flushing a violent shade of red. He pointed a shaking finger at Julian. "He is an imposter, Robert. Look at him. He is a fraud. He is wearing a mask." The guests began to murmur. A low tide of confusion and fear. People backed away, creating a wide circle around the two men, two identical faces, two identical voices, but one was dry, composed, and hosting a party. The other was wet, manic, and screaming. "Security!" Lucas yelled, turning toward the door. "Get this clown out of my house." "The doors are locked, sir," Marcus said from the corner, his voice calm. He didn't draw his weapon yet. He was waiting for my signal. "Nobody is leaving." Camille let out a small, terrified squeak. She turned and grabbed the handle of the front door, pulling frantically. It didn't budge. The magnetic locks I had engaged were rated to withstand a battering ram. She was trapped in the cage she had helped build. "Isabel." Lucas spun toward me. Tell them who I am." This was the moment. The script called for the grieving widow, but the improvisation called for the confused wife. I needed to drag this out. I needed him to unravel completely in front of the witnesses. I stepped forward, my hands trembling a practiced affectation. I looked at Lucas, then at Julian. I widened my eyes, letting tears well up. I don't understand," I stammered, backing away until my back hit the fireplace mantel. "Lucas, why are there two of you?" "There aren't two of us," Lucas shouted, taking a step toward me. "I am your husband. That man is a stranger. He is the actor, the one I told you about." "Told me about?" I asked, my voice rising in hysteria. "You never told me about an actor. You said you were in Paris." "I was in Paris," Lucas yelled, then realized his mistake. "No, I mean, I have been here all weekend, darling," Julian cut in smoothly. He walked over to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. His touch was warm, steady. "We cooked dinner on Friday. We watched that documentary you like on Saturday. Don't let this lunatic confuse you. Get your hands off her." Lucas lunged, but Marcus stepped in his path. A solid wall of muscle in a suit. "Back off," Marcus warned. Lucas stopped, chest heaving. He looked at the board members, who were watching him with growing suspicion. He realized he was losing the room. He needed to prove he was the original. "Ask me something," Lucas demanded, his eyes wild. "Ask me something only I would know. Robert, ask me about the Q3 projections. Ask me about the merger." "Anyone can read a spreadsheet," Julian scoffed. "Isabel, ask him about us." I looked at the real Lucas. "Okay," I whispered. "Where did we go for our honeymoon?" "Santorini." Lucas shouted immediately. "We stayed at the Mystique. We had the villa with the infinity pool. You got sunburned on the second day, and we had to buy that expensive aloe cream from the village pharmacy." It was the correct answer. The board members nodded. It sounded convincing. I turned to Julian. Julian smiled. A sad, tender smile. "We went to Santorini. Yes," he said softly. But we didn't stay at the Mystique the whole time. Remember the AC broke in the villa? We moved to that little bed and breakfast on the cliff for the last 2 nights. The one with the blue shutters. We drank cheap wine and ate olives on the roof, and you told me that was the happiest you had ever been. My heart skipped a beat. That detail, the bed and breakfast, wasn't in the digital archives. It wasn't on social media. I had written it in a physical journal that I kept in the nightstand. Julian must have read it during his study sessions while I was at work. He is lying. Lucas stammered, but he looked shaken. He had forgotten the bed and breakfast. He only remembered the 5-star luxury. And, Julian continued, twisting the knife, you have a birthmark on your left shoulder blade, shaped like a crescent moon, and you are allergic to strawberries. But you eat them anyway because you love the taste, and then you complain about the hives for 2 days. I read that in his file, Lucas screamed. He is using my life against me. Robert Sterling stepped forward, his face stern. He looked at Lucas, the man standing next to a shivering, younger mistress, dripping water on the floor, screaming like a banshee. Then he looked at Julian, the man standing next to the wife, calm, protective, and detailed. Lucas, Robert said, addressing the man in the trench coat, or whoever you are, you seem unstable. And who is this woman? He gestured to Camille. She is my assistant, Lucas lied, the perspiration on his forehead mixing with the rainwater. I have never seen her at the office, the CFO noted dryly, and I approve all hiring. She is a consultant, Lucas snapped. Look, this is insane. I am the chief strategy officer of this company. I built the Zephyr project. Actually, Julian said, I built the strategy for Zephyr. You just took the credit. You son of a bitch. Lucas lost it. He reached into his trench coat. Gun, one of the agents shouted. The room erupted in screams. The board members dove behind the heavy leather sofas. Robert Sterling scrambled backward, knocking over a tray of crystal glasses. Lucas pulled out a sleek, black Glock 19. He didn't aim it at me. He aimed it straight at Julian's chest. Nobody move, Lucas screamed, his voice cracking. I will kill him. I will kill this fraud. Julian didn't move. He stood his ground, though I saw his throat swallow hard. He was terrified, but he was holding the line. I did the work, I took the risks, and I deserve the payout. He was confessing. He was so desperate to prove his identity, to prove he was the real architect of his own genius, that he was admitting to the crime in front of 20 witnesses. I won, Lucas shouted, his eyes gleaming with madness. The transfer is complete. The money is in my account. You can't stop it. I am leaving here, and I am taking this copy with me to ensure I get out safely. He grabbed Camille by the arm and shoved her toward the door. Open it. I can't, Camille sobbed. It is sealed. Isabel. Lucas pointed the gun at me now. Unlock the door, or I swear to God, I will start shooting. I will start with him. He swung the barrel back to Julian. You won't shoot him, I said. Try me. Lucas cocked the weapon. I have nothing to lose. I have the money. I just need to get out. You don't have the money, Lucas, I said softly. I checked the balance. You checked a mirror, I said. I rerouted the transfer. The money is currently sitting in a federal holding account, and the file you sent Volkov. It wasn't Zephyr. It was a 3-terabyte compilation of Mr. Jingles playing with yarn. Lucas stared at me. The reality of what I said hit him like a physical blow. The money was gone. The deal was botched. The mistress was useless. The exit was sealed. All he had left was the gun and the hatred. His face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated malice. He looked at Julian, the living embodiment of his failure. If I go down, Lucas whispered, I am taking the evidence with me. His finger tightened on the trigger. He wasn't aiming to escape anymore. He was aiming to destroy. Julian squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the impact. No, I screamed. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I moved. As Lucas's finger depressed the trigger, I launched myself forward, not at Lucas, but across the space between him and Julian. Bang! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. I felt a searing heat graze my arm, like a hot poker being dragged across the skin. I slammed into Julian, knocking him backward over the coffee table. We crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs and shattered glass. "Isabel!" Julian screamed. But the gunshot had done something else. The sound of the discharge triggered the acoustic sensors I had rigged in the smart home system. Gunshot detected, initiating countermeasure. The room suddenly plunged into darkness as the main lights cut. A split second later, strobing emergency lights blinding white and red erupted from the ceiling fixtures, disorienting everyone, and then, the sonic cannon I had installed in the hallway, a prototype non-lethal deterrent from Ether's own RD lab, fired. A high-frequency pulse blasted through the foyer. Lucas screamed, dropping the gun and clapping his hands over his ears as the sound wave hit him with the force of a physical punch. It was designed to incapacitate, to scramble the inner ear and cause instant vertigo. Camille collapsed, vomiting on the marble floor. Marcus and his team moved. They didn't need to see. They had tactical earpieces shielding them from the sound. I lay on the floor, Julian's heavy weight shielding me from the chaos. My arm was burning, wet with blood, but I was alive. "Target secure," I heard Marcus yell over the wail of the siren. I looked up through the strobing light. Lucas was on his knees, pinned to the ground by 2 agents. His face was pressed into the wet marble, his eyes wide and vacant, staring at the shoes of the man he had created. Julian pushed himself up, glass shards falling from his suit. He looked down at me, his face pale with terror. "You got shot," he whispered, staring at the tear in my red dress where blood was blooming. "It is just a scratch," I gritted out, sitting up. "I told you, Julian, I am the director. I don't die in the 3rd act." I stood up, shaky, but adrenaline-fueled. The strobe stopped, replaced by the harsh, flat glare of the emergency lights. Robert Sterling slowly peeked out from behind the sofa. The CFO was dusting off his knees. The room was a wreck, but in the center of the foyer, Lucas Merriweather was in handcuffs. I walked over to him. He looked up at me, his expression broken, stripped of all arrogance. He croaked. "Why didn't you just leave me?" I looked down at him, feeling the sting of the bullet graze on my arm and the weight of 7 wasted years in my chest. "Because, Lucas," I said, my voice cold and hard as a diamond, "you didn't just cheat on me, you tried to edit my reality, and nobody edits my code without my permission." "Get him out of here," I signaled Marcus. As they dragged him toward the elevator, Lucas looked back one last time, not at me, but at Julian. Julian stood tall, adjusting his cuffs, wiping a smudge of blood from his cheek. He looked at his creator and, for the first time, didn't look away. The elevator doors closed, severing the connection forever. I turned back to the room. The board of directors was staring at me. "So," I said, smoothing my torn dress and looking at Robert Sterling. "About that project briefing, I think we should reschedule for tomorrow. I have a little cleanup to do." 3 months after the raid on my penthouse, the federal courthouse in downtown Seattle smelled of lemon pledge and desperation. I sat in the front row of the gallery, my hands folded neatly in my lap. To my right sat Elena, wearing her dress uniform, her captain's bars gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. To my left was Marcus, looking uncomfortable in a tie, chewing on a toothpick. We were watching the final act of Lucas Merriweather. Even in an orange jumpsuit, Lucas tried to project an air of superiority. He sat at the defense table, leaning over to whisper furiously to his high-priced lawyer, a man named Sterling, no relation to the Ether chairman who looked like he regretted taking the case. The trial had been a circus. The evidence was overwhelming: the biometric logs, the audio recordings, the testimony of Julian Thorne, and the physical documents Elena had seized in Paris. But Lucas was a narcissist, and narcissists do not accept defeat. They only negotiate terms. "Your Honor," Lucas's lawyer stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. "My client is prepared to offer a plea deal. However, there is a complication. Mr. Merriweather has informed the prosecution that, he hesitated, searching for a polite word for blackmail. A fail-safe protocol was installed on the Ether Dynamics servers prior to his arrest. The judge, a woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen every variety of human greed, peered over her glasses. A fail-safe. Lucas stood up, ignoring his lawyer's restraining hand. A dead man's switch, he announced, his voice ringing with the old arrogance. It is encrypted with a rolling key that only I possess. If I do not enter a code every 24 hours, which I've been doing via my lawyer, the entire Ether Dynamics database, including the Project Zephyr source code and all backups, will be irretrievably deleted. It is a digital nuclear option. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Robert Sterling and the Ether board members, sitting 2 rows behind me, gasped. "I want a deal," Lucas demanded, looking directly at the prosecutor. 5 years at a minimum security facility, no restitution, and I keep 10% of the sale price as a consulting fee, or the company dies today. It was a bluff, or at least, he thought it was a hostage situation. He believed he still held the detonator. The prosecutor looked nervous. He glanced at the judge, then at the Ether executives. Billions of dollars were at risk. "Ms. Merriweather," the prosecutor called out, turning to me. "You were the lead analyst on the forensic audit. Can you verify this threat?" I stood up. I smoothed the skirt of my Navy suit business armor and walked to the witness stand. I was sworn in. "Mrs. Merriweather," the judge said, "is this true? Is there a dead man's switch?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said calmly into the microphone. Lucas did install a deletion protocol. It was designed to wipe the servers if he was apprehended. He linked it to the enter key on his remote terminal in Paris. He believes that by not pressing it, he is holding the data hostage, or that by pressing a specific sequence now, he can stop it. Lucas smirked at me from the defense table. "She knows I'm the only one who can stop it. Tell them, Isabel. Tell them they need me." I turned to look at him. "Actually, Lucas, you already pressed the button." His smirk faltered. "What?" "In Paris," I continued, addressing the courtroom. "When you tried to upload the Zephyr data to Volkov, you pressed send. You thought you were completing the transaction, but I had remapped your keyboard commands. I pulled a folded document from my blazer pocket. When you pressed send in Paris, you didn't trigger a data upload," I explained, my voice steady and clear. "You triggered the dead man's switch, but I had rewritten the payload code 3 hours before you landed." "Rewritten," Lucas whispered, his face paling. "I didn't delete the switch. Lucas, I repurposed it. Instead of wiping the company data, the protocol was reprogrammed to access the offshore holding accounts where you had staged the stolen funds, the $100 million you thought was safe in the Caymans." I unfolded the document and held it up. It was a transaction receipt. "The moment you pressed that button, you authorized a wire transfer of the entire balance, but not to your account. And not to the FBI." I looked at the judge. "Your Honor, the $100 million has been irrevocably distributed. $50 million was transferred to the Children's Defense Fund. The other $50 million was transferred to the Wounded Warrior Project. The transaction cleared this morning. It was made in the name of Lucas Merriweather. An anonymous, non-refundable donation." The courtroom exploded. Lucas slammed his hands on the table. "No, that is my money. That is my exit strategy. It is charity now." "Lucas," I said, a small, cold smile touching my lips, "you are officially the most generous philanthropist in the history of federal crime. You saved thousands of lives. And the best part? You can't take it back. It is gone." Lucas slumped into his chair, looking as if he had been physically gutted. The leverage was gone. The money was gone. The threat was empty. The judge pounded her gavel, hiding a smile behind her hand. "Order, order in the court." She looked down at Lucas. "Mr. Merriweather, since you have no leverage and no assets, and since you have admitted to the existence of this malicious protocol, the court sees no reason for leniency." She adjusted her glasses. For the charges of grand larceny, corporate espionage, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, I sentence you to 25 years in a federal penitentiary, no possibility of parole." 25 years, Lucas whispered, staring at the table. As the bailiffs moved in to cuff him, he looked back at me one last time. There was no anger left in his eyes, only a profound, hollow confusion. He still couldn't understand how the script he had written had been edited so thoroughly. I didn't look away. I watched him until the side door closed behind him. The chapter was closed. 6 weeks later, a package arrived at my new office. It had no return address, just a postmark from Chicago. Inside was a paperback book. The cover was simple, black with white text, "The Shadow Husband, My Life in Another Man's Skin." The author was listed as anonymous. I opened it. The dedication page had 3 words, "For the Director." Tucked inside the cover were 2 tickets to the opening night of Hamlet at the Steppenwolf Theater in Chicago, and a handwritten note. "Dear Isabel, I am not Julian Thorne anymore, and I am definitely not Lucas. I am acting under a stage name now, one that belongs only to me." The book deal paid for my legal fees and the restitution I owed. The probation officer says I am a model citizen. I play the ghost of King Hamlet next month. It feels fitting. I spent 3 months haunting a life that wasn't mine. Now, I get to do it on stage where it belongs. Thank you for rewriting the ending. You didn't just save your life. You gave me back mine, yours, the imperfect copy. I smiled and placed the book on my desk. I wouldn't go to the play "Julian Deserved His Fresh Start" without a reminder of his crimes sitting in the front row, but I kept the tickets, a souvenir of the man who had been a better husband in 3 months than Lucas had been in 7 years. I looked around my new office. The brass plaque on the frosted glass door read, "Merriweather Sisters, Forensic Security Asset Protection." We weren't just a consulting firm. We were a fortress for women who suspected their reality was being edited. Elena walked in, tossing her flight cap onto the sofa. She looked radiant, 4 stripes on her shoulder epaulets. Captain Elena Merriweather, chief pilot for the European sector. "The paint is dry in the lobby," Elena said, pouring herself a coffee. "And we just got a retainer from that senator's wife in Dutch Sea. She thinks her husband is using deep-fake audio to fake committee meetings while he is with his mistress." "Is he?" I asked, looking up from my screen. "Oh, definitely," Elena grinned. "I tracked his transponder. He is on a yacht in the Mediterranean. I can have the photos by noon." "Good," I said. "Send her the invoice." "By the way," Elena said, leaning against the doorframe, "your flight is in 3 hours. Are you packed?" "I have been packed for 7 years," I said. The cabin of the Air France jet was quiet. Bathed in the soft, ambient lighting of first class, I sat in seat 1A, the same seat Elena had seen Lucas in that night. The flight attendant, a young woman with an impeccable bun, approached with a bottle of Dom Pérignon. "Champagne, madame," she asked. I looked at the crystal flute. For a moment, I saw the ghost of Lucas raising a glass to Camille. I saw the lie that had started it all. "Yes," I said. "Please." She poured the golden liquid. The bubbles rose in a perfect, chaotic stream. I wasn't going to Paris for romance. I wasn't going to find myself. I was going to Paris for a closing. When the French authorities seized Lucas's assets, the apartment on Avenue Montaigne, the one he had bought for Camille, the one with the view of the Eiffel Tower and the marble floors, had gone to auction. I bought it. I used the consulting fees from the ether case and the settlement from the divorce to outbid a Saudi prince. I wasn't going to live there. I was going to gut it. I was going to tear down the silk wallpaper Camille had picked out. I was going to rip up the carpets Lucas had walked on. I was turning it into the European headquarters of Merriweather Sisters. The apartment that was meant to be their love nest would become the war room where I would catch men exactly like Lucas. It was a poetic symmetry that satisfied the coder in me. I was debugging the location. I took a sip of the champagne. It was cold, crisp, and tasted like victory. I looked at the empty seat next to me. Seat 1B? For 7 years, I had been afraid of being alone. I had clung to the illusion of a partnership because the silence terrified me. I had ignored the glitches, the small errors in the code of my marriage, because I didn't want to crash the system. But now, looking at that empty leather seat, I didn't feel lonely. I felt room to breathe, room to think, room to build an empire that was entirely 100% mine. The plane began to taxi. The engines roared to life, a deep, powerful thrum that vibrated through the floor. We accelerated, faster and faster, until the friction of the ground fell away and we lifted into the sky. I looked out the window as the lights of New York faded into the darkness below. I was 30,000 feet in the air, exactly where the lie had been discovered. But this time, I was the one flying. I raised my glass to the reflection in the window, a woman with green eyes, a scar on her arm, and a steel spine. "To the glitches," I whispered. "The best revenge is not destroying your enemy. It is not screaming in court or sending them to prison, though those things are undeniably satisfying. The best revenge is living a brilliant, technicolor, unapologetic life on the ashes of their destruction. It is taking the wreckage they left behind and building a skyscraper, and my view from the top was going to be magnificent. Thank you so much for listening to this story of betrayal, high-tech justice, and the ultimate comeback. I hope you enjoyed the ride as much as I enjoyed taking it. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, while cooking dinner, or maybe on a flight to Paris? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories and theories. If you enjoyed Isabel's journey, please make sure to subscribe to Crimson Drama Stories. Hit that like button to support the channel. And don't forget to smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need a little revenge inspiration. Until next time, keep your passwords strong and your intuition stronger. Goodbye.